Hello everybody, Beckazar Dexter, back at it again to give you another very exciting video. And for today, honestly, that's something, ever since we've been playing video games, ever since from probably NES era, shoot, maybe for some people, way back in the Atari areas and on forward and stuff, we had a lot of different controllers throughout the year. We're talking about anything from the NES controller to the Super Nintendo, to the PlayStation controller, to the Xbox controller. Even some people like the Dreamcast controllers and stuff like that. We had a lot of controllers throughout the whole entire years of us, playing games in general though. But what are some of y'all's most favorite game controllers? In this video today, I'm gonna go through and pick out my top 4 favorite game controllers of all time and just give my overall thoughts and impressions about each one of them and which ones I still like using today and the ones I kind of got a little bit of nostalgia for. I might even throw in some notable honorable mentions and stuff like that to some other ones I kind of like, but they're not necessarily like the best controllers of all time or anything like that though. So if this is your first time here on the channel, make sure to go ahead and hit that like button, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and that bell so that way you don't miss any of my upcoming videos that I feel like talking about and discussing for video game related topics in general though. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump straight up into this video. So the way how this is going to be done, I will be ranking all 4 of these top 4 favorite controllers, starting off with place number 4, moving on up to spot number 1 though. But starting at number 4, I have the SNES controller. Now this honestly is not a bad controller. This one in particular is actually the SNES online wireless controller though. I don't actually have an original SNES controller, the corded one that actually plugs up into the SNES, the normal SNES one, although I have used that controller in the past because honestly there's a little story to tell. Like I used to play like a little bit of the Super Nintendo like way back in like junior high. Like my teacher, shoot, he had one that was plugged up in the back of his class. It was history class. He only taught for like 30 minutes or something like that though. But anyway though, he taught for half the class period and then I got to play some stuff. I think that was like my first interaction of playing like Super Mario World or whatever though. But yeah, but honestly, this controller right here is a really fine controller. Honestly, in terms of the D-pad, there's never been like another controller that kind of nailed it in terms of the D-pad, in terms of like the sheer size of it, as well as just kind of like the texture of it or whatever though. I know, yes, this controller is a little bit different in terms of like the, like just the texture and stuff like that on the SNES online controller compared to the original one. That's like more of a shiny gleam or whatever, but I think both of them are actually really nice. And then, you got simple buttons on it. You have like, start, select, A, B, X, and Y. The most standard A, B, X, Y formation that we even still see today with the Switch Pro controller and even the Joy-Cons themselves and whatnot though. But honestly, you can't go wrong with this controller. I can still use this same controller for playing like Tetris 99 and stuff like that, like games that commonly use the D-pad. If you don't like, why, yes, there's not like a right analog stick, so you can't necessarily use it for like every single modern game nowadays though. But if it's just a simple casual game, like maybe it's just like just a side-scrolling game or just like a 2D platform or something like that, you can't necessarily go wrong with this, especially with fighting games and stuff like that. Like Street Fighter was like really big off on the on the SNES back in the day though. I mean, you can't go wrong. Like for most fighting games, D-pad's about the way to go. And honestly, they hadn't been able to replicate this D-pad in quite some time. And I feel like the closest we might have got is maybe with like an Xbox controller-ish, but even their Elite ones is like more like a circle thing where it's like all the different 8 directional buttons up on there though. So it's a little different than the common traditional D-pad though. But honestly, yes, this SNES controller, it is one of my most favorite ones. It's not, top number 1 or anything like that though, but it's really nice to go back through and play retro games up on it. It just has a nice classic feel, like the curved body and everything like that. So honestly, really nice controller, and that's why it landed at spot number 4. Now spot number 3, don't jump on me because I know some of this might be some of y'all's number 1 favorite controller, maybe even number 2, but for me, I'll have to put it in number 3, and lo and behold, it's none other than the GameCube controller. Now before I go any further, yes, the C-pad right there, it might look black. That's not actually how it looks. It's the way how my camera is actually recording this or whatnot though, so I do apologize about that though, but I probably will have overlay footage over some of this stuff anyway though. But anyway though, this one in particular is the one that was released with Super Smash Bros. Ultimate whenever it came out, because there's a lot of people that actually like to play the GameCube controller for ever since Melee's been introduced. A lot of people have been like gravitating towards this controller and been kind of playing with it ever since, at least with most Smash games though. But in general, this kind of, even back in the day, this kind of gave us the original form factor of, you know, everything that we saw with the Xbox moving forward. PlayStation kind of did their own little thing or whatever though, but this was like almost the golden standard that Nintendo has kind of established. While yes, the A button is really big and stuff, and that's really nice and stuff like that, the X and Y and B kind of feel a little bit off, but once you start playing a bunch of games, you kind of just get used to it or whatever though. But having that A button be pretty big and pretty predominant, because that's the most like dominant button that you actually press up on this controller though, honestly, it just felt really good in the sense like that though. Now, I did play with other GameCube controllers and stuff like that. This just happens to be one of them though, but I do know that some people have the Waybird ones where it's like a whole lot fatter on the controller itself though, but it was like your form of a wireless one where you're able to change the channels and stuff like that. So it was nice. You did have to burn through like a couple of AA batteries, and you know, I guess, and that kind of bled over into the Wii era where you still had batteries to stick up in the controllers and stuff like that though. But honestly, this controller, you can't go wrong with it. I mean, this is when we started to have the two analog sticks. In the C1, it was yeah, you still able to turn the whole camera and stuff like that. It was a lot better than the C buttons that was actually on the Nintendo 64 controller itself. So I am thankful in terms of that though. But the one thing that I actually did not like too well with the GameCube controller is that D-pad. Because that D-pad, honestly, that sucker is like really small. I ain't gonna lie. It is really small. I mean, yes, you can technically do some stuff. This is probably by far the worst D-pad. And in comparison to the SNES controller I was just talking about, I was like, well, I guess form factor was the big thing. So they didn't think you were going to use the D-pad a lot though, but I kind of like using it while going through menus and stuff like that. I feel like that's the biggest time I probably use the D-pad with most modern day games nowadays. But I mean, that's the only bad thing I would say about it. Now the shoulder buttons, the L and R's, like, you know, they're full analog buttons, like you can slowly do it. I know like in Mario Sunshine, you can able like partially like shoot it and it will like partially some little water go out, and then you press all the way down, it goes all the way out. They even did an update in like Mario 3D All-Stars where it had the GameCube support, so you can technically play it like that once again though. But yeah, so it was kind of cool to have a controller like that, and we hadn't had any analog related controllers like that since with Nintendo controllers. I know Xbox has been doing it with their stuff, and then even the PlayStation has been doing it with some of their controllers as well though, with analog triggers though. But yeah, that the Z button was weird. I mean, you barely could press that sucker in. I don't know. I mean, I like the Z button, but I mean, I wish it had a little more give and click or whatever though. But other than that, it's mostly the form factor that made this controller so great. You won't catch me playing Smash Brothers Ultimate with this controller though, because I honestly think the Pro controller is a little bit better than that though. But yeah, so at spot number 3, it is the GameCube controller. Can't go wrong with that form factor. Now at spot number 2, the new upcoming one of the better controllers in recent time is actually the PlayStation 5 controller. Now, some of y'all might be thinking, well, the battery life sucks. I mean, that's probably the most negative thing about it is the battery life. But technically now I have 2 of these controllers. I have this one and I have the Starlight Blue controller though. But with these PS5 controllers though, I will say the haptic feedback is the bomb diggity. Like, I remember playing through like Guardians of the Galaxy or whatever though, and it's like, you know, like driving through, riding in the spaceship or whatever through space. Like the sound effects it can actually do from the controller itself through the haptic feedbacks almost makes it sound like something that you would normally hear in the actual game itself, but this on the controller itself. Everything from that, you can actually speak into the controller itself, so that way you don't have to actually type out all of the different stuff. You have the head jack in there, so you can technically hook up your headset and go into like online party chats and whatnot though. All that stuff is really cool and stuff. The one thing I didn't like about the DualShock controller that was on the PS4, even though I didn't own the PS4 itself, I had played it a lot through my cousins and stuff like that though. But the one thing I didn't like about the DualShock controller is its weird form factor, and honestly, I wasn't a really big fan of the 2 analog sticks being at the very bottom on the DualShock. It just kind of felt a little off or a little weird to me though. But with the DualSense, since it took like the body of like the Switch Pro controller, the Xbox controller, and then also combined it with its classic keeping the 2 analog sticks at the very bottom, kind of gravitated towards it, and it actually didn't feel too far off. I mean, it kind of feels really nice to hold up in your hand and stuff like that. You kind of get used to it. I had to position like my left hand a little bit differently for the left stick or whatever, because the right stick kind of is in that natural spot where I normally like to have it, like with a Switch Pro controller. But that left stick, I did have to reposition my hands just a little bit, but you get used to it fairly quick. And it's not that bad. So I was like, I kind of like it quite a bit though. But yeah, so honestly, the haptics itself, the new body shape, being able to speak into the controller itself, the headphone jack, which I'm not really used to a lot of headphone jacks being in controllers themselves. I mean, it's kind of been a staple for Xbox and PlayStation controllers, but not so much with the Switch itself, unless you had like the main body, like or I say Switch itself, like Nintendo in general, unless you had like a system like the 3DS or something like that that naturally had the earbud jack up or earphone jack up in there, or the Switch itself that's in the actual main body, but not necessarily the controllers. I mean, yeah, so I'm not super used to it though, but I really do like it though. So honestly, this is like one of my most favorite ones, in particular in terms of colors. I do like the Starlight Blue one. The Starlight Blue one's my absolute favorite. That's the one I really do like the absolute most though. But yeah, so at spot number 2, it's the PS5 controller. You can't go wrong with this sucker. If you can get over the bad battery life, or you can manage to hold two of these at the same time, I mean, shoot, you can't go wrong with that controller. And then last but certainly not least, at spot number 1, I have none other than the Switch Pro controller. I kind of alluded towards it quite a bit. I mean, it was the first in terms of actually introducing a new kind of level of rumble, what they actually call HD rumble, which has actually been really cool. It's not nearly as insane as the PlayStation 5's haptic feedback, which I feel like is another evolution of this, but it kind of changed up the rumble and stuff. I felt like it got the ball kind of going with HD rumble, which started off in this controller right here though. Now the one I have up right here is the Smash Brothers variant one. We have 4 different special or limited edition controllers. The Smash is Splatoon 2 one, the Xenoblade Chronicles 2, as well as Monster Hunter Rise. I have all 4 of them. And then obviously the classic Pro controller is just a straight black though. But the reason why I like this one so much is it's the form factor. It has the form factor of the GameCube controller. So we kind of went back to that. But it's not like the Wii U Pro controller where it's like you had the 2 knobs that was almost like the PlayStation style, but not at the bottom, but the 2 analog sticks at the very top. It's not like that. And you got your easy home, screenshot, plus and minus buttons all around it, ZL, ZR. It just feels really nice. And then the D-pad is much bigger than the GameCube controller though. So you basically had the whole entire package here in a traditional sense that we hadn't kind of felt really good on since the GameCube era. Wii U Pro controller kind of got a little close. It had everything there. It's just where it had the 2 analog sticks, I wasn't like a fan of that though. But this one feels really nice. The battery life lasts an incredibly long time with this controller though. I'm talking about, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I want to say it lasts about like, I want to say 50 hours. It's something ridiculous like that. Basically, you can play with one single charge of this controller for a long time. I feel like it lasts you like maybe a decent solid week or whatever before you might have to recharge it. And then me juggling around like 3 or 4 different Pro controllers or whatever, even though I have 5, I think I have 2 of them. This one's not really usable. I kind of messed up or unfortunately, the drift. The drift kind of affected the Pro controller. It doesn't affect Pro controllers that much, but I think this one did suffer from it though. But the Joy-Cons, oh gosh, it's a lot worse though. But yeah, so honestly, this is at my number 1 favorite controller right here though. Now I will say this, an honorable mention does go to the Nintendo 64 controller, because while yes, it's not, the most crazy gosh, that sucker had 3 point. Wait, hold on. Let me go grab it real quick. So I got the Nintendo 64. Same thing about this. The camera doesn't like the sheen, the shiny sheen of everything though. But while yes, it does have 3 prongs to it, and it kind of feels a little bit weird in that kind of sense though. It's like, how do you hold it? Do you just hold it like the main? Mostly, you just hold it traditional style. You hold it like this, and then you use the right hand like that, and then you did all this stuff like that. Every now and then, I guess you might have played a game like this, or sometimes you might have played a game like that. But honestly, it's nostalgia that kind of speaks to me like that. I mean, the C buttons was kind of weird going around playing with like Mario 64 and stuff like that, though. But I did have to kind of give an honorable mention to this one, because this one just kind of stands out in terms of my childhood and everything else while I was going through and playing it, though. But yeah, so that's basically it in terms of all my top 4 favorite controllers. Shoot, I know I skipped over ones like the Wii and stuff like that. as well as a lot of the other systems. I never actually owned like a Dreamcast or any of the Sega controllers or anything, so I couldn't speak on that regard though. The Xbox controller is really good. I would say it's technically up there with the Switch Pro controller though. I just never owned any of them, but I always played through my cousins, so I do have to kind of mention that out there a little bit though. But yeah, we had a lot of different good controllers throughout the year though. So y'all gotta let me know down in the comment section down below, what was your most favorite controllers ever, whether it was like the SNES one, or shoot, maybe you're an old school fan and you still technically like the NES controller or whatever though. Or do you think that whenever I mentioned the GameCube controller, you think this is like cream of the crop and you think there's no other better controller out there, so you think that the GameCube controller is your most finest one right there though? Or maybe you're kind of like me and you really do like that haptic feedback that's actually in the PlayStation 5 controller itself though, because man, that's really just a game changer though. Or are you based? Are you really fine because you're agreeing with me with the Switch Pro controller, and that's like one of the best controllers that are out there though. Maybe the Microsoft Elite controller as well. I think that one's actually fairly good as well though. I just didn't put it up in this list because I don't own it myself though. But yeah, so honestly, that's gonna basically do it in terms of this video though. So if you really like this video, make sure to go ahead and hit that like button, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and that bell to stay up to date on all things video game related I feel like talking about and discussing for the foreseeable future though. So remember y'all, until whatever video I make next, see y'all.